All right, let's get started. Really excited to be chairing this meeting. For everyone who doesn't know me, I'm Bill Johnson. I'm head of the Tri-County Sustainability Environmental Justice Committee, and we are doing a session in concert with Patrick's committee, the Energy Committee. I co-chair the Environmental Justice Committee with Renee Pollard and Sharonda Allen. And our committee priorities are air quality improvement, green jobs, and the expansion of community solar. My co-host tonight, as I said, is our buddy Patrick McDevitt. So, hey, Patrick, glad to see you there, and take over.
Great. Thanks, Bill. So, yes, hi, I'm Patrick McDevitt. I chair the Energy and Power Committee, and our focus, of course, continues to be the expansion of the EV infrastructure in the state, building electrification, and, of course, renewable energy here in South Jersey and throughout the state. So, for the record, we definitely are big supporters of offshore wind. It is a vital component of New Jersey's transition to a clean energy economy, and me especially, and we're all excited, especially with the progress right here in Gloucester County with the New Jersey wind port at the port of Paulsboro. So we're watching that continue to progress. And that brings us to tonight's guest, Attentive Energy. So Attentive is participating in the BPU's third round of offshore wind solicitations. And as part of their outreach, they have asked to speak with us tonight. So format-wise, I understand they're going to have a brief overview of their organization, talk about the proposed offshore wind project and the potential benefits for South Jersey and the rest of the state. Then it will be time for asking any questions. And anyone who's on here, thanks for coming in, and feel free to put any questions in the chat, and we'll get to them after the presentation. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Attentive Energy's Managing Director and New Jersey native, Damian Bednarz. Hello, Damian.
Patrick, Bill, thank you so much for this opportunity. It is truly a pleasure from our end to really get a chance to share more about who we are and what we have coming up here in our proposal for New Jersey and getting involved. It is exciting to spend even more time now in New Jersey. Always fun to do that personally, but now even more so professionally as we scale the opportunity of offshore wind. How I think we should kind of give an overview of where we're going to go with this presentation and the like. One, I think it's important for you all to understand, who Attentive Energy is and who drives that. Two, want to make sure you understand kind of our history and what we've been up to in the state to the recent point. And three, we really want to hear from you. I think this is an incredibly unique opportunity. We're very appreciative and grateful for the opportunity to hear directly from residents and especially your organization that's leading this charge on the energy transition and all the renewables and electrification that needs to take place in the state to meet its ambitious goals, both on renewables, but as well as on our climate and CO2 emissions. So thank you all for your mission and for the work you do. But first, let's start off a little bit about me. So I'm Damian Bednarz. I'm the Managing Director for Attentive Energy. I've been leading this team now for the past couple of years. I actually started with this offshore wind team back in January 2020. So over almost 3.5 years now of directly involvement here in the bite, focused on really telling our story, but also thinking through exactly how we do this differently. How do we approach this differently? I have over a dozen years of clean energy deployment under my belt, specifically as it relates to the Northeast. So a lot of large-scale renewable deployment, a lot of advocacy campaigns, as well as a lot of communications work on tech startups and everybody in the clean energy space. Before I started doing a lot of consulting in the Northeast, I was at the U.S. Department of Energy, where I was working for the Obama administration, primarily on the deployment and coordination we had on climate with a lot of our international partners. But before that, I love to hear the fact of the New Jersey native point because it reminds me that I started in Passaic County, grew up in Bergen County, lived in Hudson County, and it was to my surprise only when Oriana told me that there's a thing called the Tri-County. I grew up knowing the Tri-State. That was the extent of my tri. But now knowing the Tri-County, I have a deeper appreciation because this is becoming the center of gravity for offshore wind in New Jersey. And that's something I'm very proud to be a part of. So let me start off a little bit more about the project. Attentive Energy project has been, and the team have been involved in New Jersey really since 2018. Since that first stakeholder meeting with the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management and Department of Interior and the state of New Jersey, as they set off about how to actually scale offshore wind with future lease sales. We then established an office in Jersey City back in 2019. That's when we officially started operations. We grew that team thoughtfully, meaningfully, across the Bight. We then participated in the historic auction that took place in February of 2022. We successfully acquired lease area 538. That's 84,000 square acres, about 42 miles east of Barnegat on the Jersey Shore, and about 52 miles south of Jones Beach on Long Island. You can see that on that map there on the screen. Besides being engaged and talking through exactly how we want to establish ourselves, but also how meaningful we want to be about our engagement here in New Jersey, we put a higher emphasis on our community engagement efforts well before we knew even where we were going to be on the map. And we'll spend some time talking a little more about how we did that and why we think we're different and why we think this is the right time for Attentive Energy in New Jersey. First, probably a little more about our parent company. We are the subsidiary of Total Energies Renewables. Total Energy is a multi-energy company, global in scale, over 130,000 employees in over 100 countries. We've been in the US since the 1950s. I can tell you this, they have incredible ambition to meet the energy transition. All of my work leading to this moment, it is amazing to be a part of an organization of this scale, of this immense resource, to be committing to the energy transition. And that's critical. Total Energies is the 5th largest renewable developer in the United States. I didn't know that until about a year ago. Through its solar requirements, as well as the deep bench of where we're going to be headed with offshore wind. We have about 4,000 megawatts in the pipeline right now. That's the Bight, as well as Carolina, since winning our auction last year, with even more ambition to participate in future auctions in the Gulf of Mexico, Central Atlantic, etc. That's going to be fixed bottom and floating technologies we'll be pursuing. That's in addition to all the work that we're doing on the ground. Total Energy also has a footprint in New Jersey. Really, since the 80s, we've been acquiring and increasing our manufacturing base here, both in Linden, Trenton, but even more so recently, the staggering amount of solar that's been coming online, working with the Delaware Valley Authority on creating more opportunities for solar deployment. This company has an ambitious goal of being net zero by 2050. 100 gigawatts of renewables online by 2030. 25% of that, 25, is already here in the United States, with a lot more room to go. On the offshore wind front, we have over 10,000 megawatts globally. Here's a quick view of where we are. We have active projects at various stages of development in South Korea, Taiwan, the UK, France, and of course, the ever-growing market and our primary emphasis today, but also a key goal of this company, the United States. What's exciting about this is that with 10,000 megawatts in the pipeline, there's a lot of great lessons learned. There's also an immense amount of experience. Total Energy has been involved in offshore work for decades. We know how to build an offshore wind farm. We know exactly what it takes to get electrons, clean electrons, from the ocean to the grid. Now, to the next slide. Before we talk a little more about exactly gigawatts, dollar figures, balance sheets, and all the like, take a little minute to talk about who are we? Who are these folks that are spending time with you this evening? And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Oriana.
Thanks, Damien. Hi, everyone. My name is Oriana. I'm the External Affairs Associate with Attentive Energy. So as Damien mentioned, really want to tell you guys a little bit more about who we are. So we're a team of passionate, experienced engineers, scientists, environmental planners, and outreach professionals. And we really pride ourselves on having a homegrown team. We have our fisheries liaison who lives in the Highlands out in Monmouth County. We have our fisheries representative who lives in Cape May. And over the years have really cultivated this very local and passionate team. I myself, as Damien mentioned, made him aware of the Tri-County region of New Jersey. I'm a South Jersey resident, born and raised. I love South Jersey. I'm in Burlington County, and I have definitely more of a background in student advocacy and community organizing, so a little different than the normal trajectory into renewables, but really focused on how to cultivate environmental and social change during my time at Rutgers Camden, where I worked very closely with the New Jersey Public Interest Research Group, leading a lot of the work that we were doing across all 3 Rutgers campuses in the state. And I'm actually back at Rutgers Camden now, getting my master's in public affairs and community development. So close to home for me to be talking with you all about what we're up to at Attentive Energy. As Damien, go back really quick, Fabio. Thanks. As Damien mentioned, being with the team for a few years now, I've been with the team for about 2.5 years and got my start actually as an intern during my time at Rutgers Camden, and really was propelled into this world of offshore wind and fighting climate change now on the front end, because I spent 3.5 years doing that in undergrad at Rutgers, working on the back end, like most of you all, organizing boots on the ground, engaging with the local communities and bringing them into this. That's something that we really pride ourselves on at Attentive Energy. So excited to tell you a little bit more about kind of our values and how we do that work. So everything that we do is really grounded around our values and this energy that we bring to our everyday work. And it's really how we plan the work that we're doing, how we think about our partnerships, how we pinpoint who we're going to engage with and really build this clean, renewable energy future. Really leading on the deep experience and drawing on everything that Damien mentioned about Total Energies, our parent company, who has really been doing offshore wind development now for a while, leaning on them for that expertise, bringing that to the New York, New Jersey region so that we can bring offshore wind, make that a reality and bring that to the state. So our homegrown talent is really helping us to create a very unique vision around how to do that while leveraging this expertise from Total. We're also very community minded, so believing that offshore wind starts onshore, but not forgetting about our offshore partners as well, and making sure that we are able to create very valuable and meaningful partnerships with all stakeholders, meeting unique needs and concerns and hearing from everyone, particularly those who are in overburdened communities and disadvantaged communities, and making sure that they have a part in this new growing industry as well, and that we're getting this right from the start early on. And the last value that's really important to us is being forward thinking in everything that we're doing, and really making sure that we're creating partnerships that are value add for everyone involved, but not thinking about the short term. We really are invested and ingrained as a partner from the start, thinking about what those 25, 30-year long partnerships can look like throughout the duration of our project, and making sure, like I said, that we're engaging with all the unique stakeholders in the region who can be a part of this industry, but also benefit from it as well. So these are just our values overview, really what we live and breathe by, and it's how we decide, that we're going to run our project and make sure that we're developing this industry right from the start, and that it's equitable and meaningful. So Damien will give you a little bit more kind of insight into how we're actually living out these values in the day-to-day, and what we were able to propose to New York State. So Damien will show you how we're walking the walk.
Right. Thank you, Oriana. And that's a key point there. Why do we show you these values? These values were created and fully embedded in this team long before any auction, long before any investment was made. And it's important now to just give a quick glimpse into New York. We won't spend much time in New York. Look, I know we're talking through the Tri-Counties here, but it's important to give a little perspective of walking the walk, as Oriana just said. We've been in the bite now for over 4 years. We just competed and put in a pretty ambitious and intensive proposal for New York's third solicitation just past January. We're very proud of this, and I'll tell you why. It does encapsulate all the values that we just spoke about. We chose our partner with true care and thinking through who we'll actually be working with on the long haul, who's going to be part of this journey with us to deploy offshore wind, but to do it the right way. Do it the right way from the start. So we partnered with Rise Light and Power, who runs the Ravenswood Generating Facility. It's New York City's largest energy facility, and it's been in operation since the 60s. It's also located in what they term Asthma Alley. It's a disadvantaged community in Western Queens, close to numerous public housing, the largest public housing actually in the country. And since the 60s has been really deploying and keeping the lights on in New York City. There's an opportunity to transition this entire site. And it starts. The opportunity gets unlocked with offshore wind. And so working with them, our proposal, we have proposed that we could interconnect about 1.4 gigawatts of offshore wind into Queens, directly into the generating facility, going up the East River, connecting directly to that facility and taking fossil energy offline, repurposing that plant with renewables. It's possible. It's great because the U.S. Secretary of Energy, who recently visited the site, Jennifer Granholm, stated, this is a transformative story, an ideal approach for the country. We're very proud of this opportunity. Second, it's important to be involved in the communities that actually have that direct impact, especially this disadvantaged community. And to have that support from a community that understands what this transition looks like. Third, there's been a union workforce keeping the lights on in New York City for decades. We're not going to leave them behind. We're working with them on a just transition effort that these workers will have the same opportunity as others to compete and actually have a role in the future operations and maintenance base that will be located at the facility. 3, we're going to be putting forward ambitious proposals for further port development. I mentioned the O&M facility at Queens, as well as a marshalling point in Staten Island to increase due to the massive demand of offshore wind that's going to be needed in the decade ahead. Lastly, we put in a $300 million economic benefits initiative with a historic $30 million dedicated to environmental conservation and marine mammal protection. Again, this is a glimpse, but this is New York. New Jersey is going to be different. It is going to be unique for New Jersey. We intend to be as ambitious in New Jersey. Next slide, please. So you're all probably asking yourselves, why? Why us? Why Attentive Energy? Why New Jersey? So let's start from the very beginning of this. We have provided and engaged in meaningful conversations with multiple communities for years now. A few examples. We have a fisheries liaison that Oriana mentioned that lives in Monmouth County, but we actually had fishing engagement long before we even knew where we were going to be on the map. We invested in surveys. We invested in tons of work of engaging with fishermen at the docks for years during the pandemic, before or after. And it continues to this day with a thoughtful communications plan. We want to get in early with those kind of stakeholders, understand what their concerns are, and have that two-way conversation. Long before an auction, it was important that our entire team, the entire Total Energies offshore wind team, understood what it takes to develop infrastructure in New Jersey. We spoke to the Ironbound community in Newark and said, yes, we want to see a toxic tour. Yes, we talked to OREC. We had them come in and understand what is the role of EJ in offshore wind development. It's important that this team understands that. It's important that this team gets it from the very beginning. It influences how we make decisions. It influences the investments we make in this state. Lastly, on early engagement, we've heard what has happened in the past, where the gaps and where we can do to provide further guidance and investments as it relates to workforce, also supply chain. It's very important that the supply chain is localized, diverse, and reflects New Jersey, small businesses. And so we took early strides both in New York and now in New Jersey to run a survey to understand what the gaps are for MWBEs and others to get involved in the offshore industry early. We reached out to students to understand what the pipeline looks like for future engagement. And so that middle school kids today can understand what a potential job looks like a decade from now or sooner to either work a wind farm in the manufacturing side of it or in the support side. The supply chain is vast. It's important for it to be localized here in Jersey. Last point as to why I think it's us and why we're ready for New Jersey. We bring an immense amount of experience and resources and are ready for the long haul. We're not here to flip a project. This isn't some real estate deal. We're here to build a relationship for the next 25 to 35 years. it's important that when we make a decision on who we partner with, we're intentional and we are planning to do it for the long haul. And that's why all the issues that we engage on, both from a local level, statewide, and nationally, are fully synthesized and combined. Is how we approach that effort. And we believe that New Jersey has that ambition. We know that this is where the opportunities headed. We want to be a part of it. Now, Fabio here is going to tell you a little bit more about the how.
Oh, hi, my name is Fabio Herman. I'm the Community Engagement Manager here with Attentive Energy. First, I want to just thank you all for the space. Part of my role is to make sure that I'm helping the team make sure that we're living our mission in everything that we do, whether it's our investments, our engagements, our partnerships. So this is the type of engagement that honestly fuels and feeds everything that we do with Attentive Energy. But a little bit more about myself. I actually joined Attentive Energy in August, and I'm also a recent New Jersey resident. I'm actually from New York City, and I'm now loyal to West Orange, where I've been at for a few months, and I'm learning the lay of the land, learning different counties. But a lot of the work that I've done in the past is directly translatable to everything that's going on here in New Jersey. And like before this role, I was working with NJEDA, where I was actually standing up some of the initial offshore wind workforce projects in the state. That includes investments with Votex. It includes a partnership with community colleges. So and before that, I was also helping stand up some workforce development programs in the city, in New York City, helping build the capacity of nonprofits. And I've even started my own nonprofit that I run as a passion project, where I help young men of color get access to education on mental health. So when I heard about this opportunity with Attentive Energy, it felt like it was the right mix of all the background, all the work I've done to develop communities in my home state and here in New Jersey as well, to bring about a new industry and make sure that I'm still living my mission of building the local capacity, engaging overburdened communities and disadvantaged communities, but still being able to have a forward-looking vision of what industries are coming and how they can be looped in to make sure that this time around, communities like the one that I'm from aren't left behind with this new industry. And I'm here to talk to you a bit more about how we engage and what we're doing to date in New Jersey on the engagement front. So we've been engaging early, as Damien said, and often, consistently, to create the necessary ecosystem for offshore wind. It's been said many times before, you've heard this before, but it is a once-in-a-generation opportunity, and it requires the creation of a whole ecosystem that involves all the stakeholders you see on your screen. We've been having conversations with these folks to get a sense of what those needs are, what their priorities are, to then again inform and create a project that is driven by the priorities of the environmental justice organizations, the fishing and mariner communities, organized labor, business and industry, small diverse businesses, and different other entities in the state that are going to be, again, impacted through the broader offshore wind industry. I do want to just talk a bit more about the fisheries and mariner engagement. It was mentioned a few times on our slide, but this is a very direct example of how we're, again, building that diverse team with diverse experiences and making sure that we're not leaving any stakeholder behind. As Oriana mentioned, we have a fisheries liaison who's actually based out of Monmouth County. Through his charisma, through his also like expertise, this guy's a fish expert, one of the best guys to hang out around, because he's always has an anecdote related to fish. But he's been able to ingrain himself deeply into the community, into the fishing stakeholder groups, and he's always sharing anecdotes about his experiences. But he's also working to make sure that he's able to reflect and understand the challenges and the needs of those communities as it relates to our projects. We also, as Ariana mentioned, there is a fisheries representative that we recently brought on board who's based out of Cape May, again, aiming to do the same things, get closer to the stakeholders, understand what the needs are, help inform them and build their capacity so they can better engage with the offshore wind industry. And I would be remiss not to mention, one of my favorite coworkers is a gentleman named Brian Lefebvre, who is our Marine Affairs Manager. He's actually has a long history of working with the U.S. Coast Guard, and most recently held the title of Captain of the Port of Maine in Portland, Maine, wherein he, and now with Attentive Energy, he's helping us lead our port strategy, making sure that our projects that are happening offshore are engaging with ports in an appropriate way and identifying the right ports that are going to lead to a project that's going to mitigate any risks, any impacts to the communities, but also lead to viable transmission and marshaling and manufacturing for our projects. So our goal of engagement is that we want to, as I mentioned again, we want to become an ingrained local partner from the start, because we understand the importance of keeping stakeholders apprised of these projects so that we can create the necessary ecosystem. Ecosystem is a big word here because there are lots of stakeholders around the map that are going to have to be part of this. And this involves investing in initiatives to support the supply chain and small businesses. Damien mentioned the MWBE and nonprofit surveys that we released earlier this month. The goal with those surveys is to get it out, get a chance to hear from stakeholders beyond the conversations that we're having to identify how we can tailor a project that's going to create the diverse supply chain. And as well as investing in the education and workforce. We've been active in career fairs, and we're looking to share information with students to train and expose the workforce of tomorrow on what opportunities are going to come with offshore wind. So just to give you some concrete examples of what this looks like, earlier this month, we sponsored and partnered with the Girl Scouts of the Jersey Shore to create a STEAM lab and also cover costs of low-income scouts to give the young girls a chance to learn more about STEAM, but also expose them to offshore wind. Just yesterday, actually, one of our colleagues, Karen Imus, led an effort along with the Hackensack Riverkeeper, where we sponsored an eco cruise through the Hackensack River for a group of high school students from Bergen and Hudson counties. This was an effort, again, to expose them to environmental issues and also topics that are close to offshore wind. And at the end of the month, actually, in about 2 to 3 weeks, we'll be doing another series of our student days. Our student days is what Damien mentioned earlier. They're these events that we host in partnership with high schools to give youth an direct exposure to offshore wind through virtual reality. We know that it's going to be hard to get folks offshore, so we bring offshore to the classroom with these VR headsets. Beyond engaging in education and workforce, there's also the pure grassroots community engagement that's necessary for all this work. We mentioned our engagement with folks like Ironbound Community Corporation to help build our internal capacity, but we're also looking for ways to build their capacity and how they engage with the industry. We're doing these surveys now, and these surveys are going to help us inform what the needs are. But in our early conversations, a lot of what we do is based on building on a basic understanding of what offshore wind for our stakeholders, and we don't take that for granted. We don't take for granted the trust that they give us in asking us questions about the industry. So actually, as a preview, in the coming weeks, we're going to pilot a series of ENGO trainings focused on building capacity on offshore wind, exploring topics like what is offshore wind power, identify what the supply chain is, and also helping them understand how they can plug in as the representatives of overburdened communities as to how they can plug into the broader offshore wind industry to, again, continue adding value to themselves, but also to the stakeholders and all Jersey residents, all with the goal, again, of building the broader ecosystem. And with that, I'll pass it off to Damien for some closing thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Fabio. I mean, there's no shortage of anecdotes and conversations and things we've learned along the way. And we only hope that reflects the proposal we intend to submit at the end of June. So again, just a reminder that, and this was stated at the top, we're in a competitive process here in New Jersey. And it's great, actually. This was the intent of that federal auction, is to create that competition. Competition is great. Brings out the best ideas and actually encourages further investment across the state. And frankly, it's a boon to ratepayers. And it's a great opportunity to reduce some of these costs. So again, I wanted to state that at the very top, that we are in a competitive process, so we may not be able to engage in certain details as they come forward. But I wanted to again say thank you, because this is a great opportunity just to hear from you all and answer your questions. So the floor is open. Patrick, Bill, I defer to you all how you'd like to MC this, and we're happy also to read things in the chat.
Great. I would say yes. If we want to start with the chat, we do have a couple questions in there. Thanks, Chris and Renee. So if you want to address that, can you talk about some of the permitting issues and some of the processes that you need to do? I'm sure you're all aware, as we are, of the recent developments down the shore, and things are happening, and of course everyone's quick to jump on with their own narrative of what's causing everything. So can you talk about how are you addressing that in your permitting process and whatnot?
Sure, absolutely. So I always say that it's the technical and the permitting is what makes this happen, and everything else essentially feeds into it. That's basically offshore wind 101. And if you get the permitting right, it all comes together. But you need the technical to actually make the opportunity work. But on the permitting front, this is an area we've heavily invested in early. And our project director was originally our permitting director. It is centered to our cause. Paul Pfeiffer is our permitting development director now. He most recently spent time as a permitting manager with Atlantic Shores. So he has a deep experience in knowing the ins and outs of New Jersey. We have completed our SAP way ahead of schedule. That was completed in January. We are on schedule for meeting all of our other federal permitting goals. We're working with an I think first-class consulting agency like AECOM for our COP development. And so permitting is key. In the key aspect of how we actually identify where and how we actually will site and engage and deploy the offshore wind opportunity in our lease area, we've also been doing a number of survey work. And that's required both survey vessels as well as unmanned vessels to map the Florida. And in that process, we have engaged in, as well as the other standard regulatory process that exists at the federal level, on having marine mammal observers on our vessels. And we take incredible care in understanding this issue. This is nothing that we just kind of just skim over. This is very important to us. We are stewards of the ocean and our environment. And so we take those extra steps. So the permitting aspect and the aspects of how we actually approach environmental engagement is center. We need that trust. And we believe that there's a great deal of misinformation on this topic, and it is dangerous because we want to make sure that all communities are informed of the topic, not just coastal communities, but really on and off the coast, because this opportunity is not just for a certain group of folks or a certain number of counties. It really is for the state.
Great, thanks. And again, anyone feel free to raise your hand in the reactions below if you want to have a question. And Renee, would you want to go ahead and read out your question?
Yeah, so my question is basically, why would Attentive project be good for communities like Camden and Newark? You say you've been in touch with Ironbound. Why would your project be good for those communities?
It's a great question, and it's very important that we actually provide some level of understanding of how we approach a community like Camden. I'll turn it over to Fabio, and then of course Camden's own Oriana. Fabio.
Renee, that's an excellent question. That's literally what drives the work that we do, directly like Oriana and myself, as we focus on identifying those community investments and those programs that are going to make sure that no Jersey residents are left behind in the process of offshore wind. So Attentive Energy would be good for communities like Camden because we understand that offshore wind doesn't just happen in one region of the state. Though offshore wind happens offshore, it's a statewide effort. The goals are statewide. It's 11 gigawatts that the Murphy administration currently is targeting for offshore wind. And we're looking to add to that through our project. So our project will be good for communities like Camden because we will, as we did in New York, we're looking for ways to create the workforce throughout the state, whether it's partnering with community colleges, partnering with universities, partnering with ENGOs, as I mentioned, some of the ones that we've been speaking with. We're looking to partner with them to give us the local context of the communities so that we can propose and create programs that are going to create and train those individuals in those communities like Camden to be able to access the training opportunities, to access different workforce efforts as well. Like, for example, EDA just launched a partnership, I think, with Camden County College to help develop some workforce programs for offshore wind. I think it would be, it's an understanding those investments, understanding what's going on, what the state has been doing well, like that an investment, and identifying ways as we as a developer could help expand those efforts. I think are very direct ways that we can add value to communities like Camden, like Newark, and other places that haven't been as involved to date in the offshore wind industry.
Great,
so
thank you.
So Patrick, I do want to mention that Renee is my fellow co-chair for environmental justice, and I wanted to call on my other co-chair, Sharonda. I know she's got a question because she always has some good questions. She's my other co-chair for environmental justice. So Sharonda, why don't you add?
Yes, hello. My name is Sharonda Allen. Yes, I'm an EJ co-chair, and I also have my own grassroots nonprofit organization, and we participate with in a lot of workforce development with the young people. What, how could my organization partner, and what sort of fiscal or financial support do you offer? Because as you know, grassroots organizations, we're struggling to get the funding because people are clout chasers. They give money to big organizations that are not even on the ground, making the real impact. I'm one of those people who's doing that. What kind of, you know, fiscal responsibility do you have, and who is your accountability agency for that type of work that you have to do?
Maybe I'll kick off and I'll have others from the team respond. But the way we're structured is that we also have a local content or supply chain lead, someone that just wakes up every day thinking about how we can localize our procurement and what we need. That's more on the technical side, in that understanding when and how we need to buy something, and then working with our partners to understand when and how can they source both services and goods to actually make the supply chain local. There's another angle to it, which is we're working with all these organizations. We're asking them for support. We're asking them for some way of getting feedback. They too need resources to maintain. And this is something that Fabio alluded to, which is important, that we need to actually increase the amount of capacity that's available to a lot of NGOs in this state to even participate. One of our anecdotes is that there was a great organization. They said, look, we have a lot of questions. I'd love to write comments to the Federal Register. I'd love to sit on this New Jersey stakeholder meeting, but I can't afford it because I got to do 3, 4 other things. And so just understanding where the gaps are to then be able to potentially even start to fill them, either through grants from the state, directly through developers, or working in partnership and creating collaborative effort where you say, okay, if I were going to spend time with you and understand where the resources are and the constraints, that's your time. How do we compensate for that so that we actually value that time? And so that's an important aspect. That's something we've been thinking through exactly from the very beginning as well. And these initial stages, there's a lot to propose. And then it's the next stage of this, which is being successful in New Jersey, then opens up the door of how do we further now make those decisions. Fabio, or I don't know if you have any other response there.
Yeah, just to add, and Sharonda, it's actually nice to see you again. I think we met a while ago at one of the TCS events.
Yes, we did. Hi.
Hi, good to see you. Good to see you. But it's asking that exact question, Sharonda, like putting it out there. That's how we help build that local capacity. Because as I mentioned, we're engaging folks on the ground, and as we meet them, we're sharing more information on offshore wind and about our project. So I would love to connect after this meeting, of course, just to see how we could potentially work together if it's like sharing more information on what the projects are. But to Damien's point, it's there are expectations with our bid that we include investments into local content, into the communities. And we would be remiss as developers, and like this is what we live every day, to not have those conversations with folks that are leading organizations like yours, to understand what the ideal programs are and what the how to frame it for the local community. Like it can't always trickle down. There's ways that we should engage from the ground, and then of course help it make its way up.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna put my cell phone number in the chat.
Great,
thank you.
Sean, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Patrick. Camden, New Jersey is often compared with Newark and the Ironbound, but the Ironbound and the New York suburbs of New Jersey have a huge advantage over South Jersey when it comes to mass transit. And so knowing that the majority of the jobs created by offshore wind are not going to be, say, in the city of Philadelphia, where currently that's where we can get to via the one train line we do have here in South Jersey. We can get to Philadelphia. Would Attentive and Total be willing to commit to help us lobby our state legislature and our the executive office and New Jersey Transit for better public transportation options in South Jersey to get the folks in Camden and Gloucester and Burlington to those offshore wind jobs, wherever they may be, but assuming they're going to be closer to the ocean than we are?
Sean, that's a great question. And maybe I just take a minute to think through exactly how we would even approach that. I mean, let's address this. There's definitely, when we think about overall well-being and how we can approach a workforce, is that can you connect the potential jobs to the communities that need them? And my first thought when you're saying this is thinking through the New Jersey Windport. New Jersey Windport is a vast opportunity for manufacturing, union jobs, et cetera, et cetera. But it's remote. It is not easy to get to. I don't know if anyone's had a chance or an opportunity to visit it or be even in the vicinity of it, but it's a trip. There is no mass transit. And so how do you actually create that opportunity for the workforce and those that want to commit to that opportunity to get there? I think in this sense, it's important for the state to understand those gaps. So as developers and those future supply chain operations, be that manufacturing or the port development itself and construction, is to identify those gaps and then work on solutions to where that could be. Be that, and in an ideal situation, you also work in a way that you actually have sustainable and electric or green opportunities to make that mass transit opportunity become a reality. So obviously we cannot commit to anything, but it is an important issue, I think, that needs to be further raised, especially at the state level, to understand how the workforce can get to the investments the state has already made, especially New Jersey Windport.
Great, thanks. How about you, Chris? You want to jump in?
Sure, I will. And this is going to probably surprise you, Damien, but last time we spoke, I think I asked you about transmission and the importance of getting all the projects online in a timely fashion to avoid things like stranded capacity, which has become a big issue even now before the projects have gotten started. I'm going to try to condense a couple questions into one here. Do you have any concerns, or obviously no, you're not as far along in development as some of the other developers in New Jersey, but do you have any concerns now, whether it be questions about transmission projects or potentially even project financing pressures that you've heard with the Von Grid, Dominion, even Orsted recently? Do you have any feeling as to those types of things could push back your schedules or your timelines, or are you guys pretty confident as to what you're currently projecting?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Transmission, I just said, how it's permitting and technical that makes the reality of offshore wind. Well, it's transmission that is, that monolith in front of you to solve. And it's definitely the hardest challenge when it comes to offshore wind is getting transmission right. The irony is that we're able to put humans on the moon in the 60s, but for some reason, we're still struggling to figure out how to get certain electrons from one area to another. But here we are today. And then again, this goes back to permitting and technical solutions. I'll say this, the state is a leader on planned transmission. This is a great thing. It is the first time it is happening in the country. New Jersey took that lead with the state approach as it relates to a single point of interconnection for the third solicitation. So with all bidders having to be required to submit proposals that will be interconnecting at Seagert's National Guard Training Center in Monmouth County, and then coming on land and interconnecting at the Larrabee Station. That is a planned transmission route because the state has decided it is actually cost effective for ratepayers and for efficiency to get electrons onto the grid to dedicate that as a landing point. What you want to avoid, and we fully agree with this, is creating a bowl of spaghetti spilled all over the shore with multiple lines and transmission points everywhere. Nobody wants that. And so the state's taking a leadership position on this. It's an investment. It's ultimately going to work out great for ratepayers and the reduction of overall costs. Now, your other question on financing. I can't speak to other offshore wind developers in this space, but I can say that with the ambition and the resources behind TotalEnergies as a parent company, Attentive Energy is positioned to actually make sure that we are submitting and supporting what we intend to. There are unforeseen things in the future, just like in 2019, many could not expect or foresee the inflation costs. These are all things for top of mind. These are all things that the current developers in New Jersey are struggling with to understand how they can actually overcome those hurdles. And I can tell you that this is something that is also very top of mind for us. And that anything we submit as a proposal is reflective of that potential concern, but also how we can overcome it and make sure that our project will be efficient, affordable, on time, and delivered exactly as needed to reduce costs on ratepayers.
Eleanor, do you want to ask your question? You have a great question here. I'm interested as somebody part of the Environmental Justice Committee. Do you want to ask your question, Eleanor? You know, unmute yourself, or I can do it for you. I think she's having trouble unmute. Okay, go ahead, Eleanor.
Okay, here we go. I was just asking, what are the necessary skills and trainings for jobs on the project? And will you, your company obviously, train and or hire from EJ communities preferentially? Would you go for folks first who are in those communities?
Thanks, Eleanor.
Sure, thank you.
Fabio, Oriana, would you like to take this one? I don't want to hog the mic.
Sure. I can start, and Oriana, feel free to jump in. On to your second question, it's a priority. It has to be a priority, engaging folks from disadvantaged, overburdened communities, especially folks that are especially minorities, women, and even thinking of folks that might have certain disabilities or might not have been included traditionally in the workforce. We're also having conversations just to get a sense of like what perspectives are with justice involved folks. So it's like about bringing them into the industry that doesn't meet that when folks haven't been engaged in the past. As far as workforce goes, as you know, we're still early in the development of our project, but I'm happy to share these resources as well. There are EDA earlier, I think late last year, actually published a really interesting report. It was a workforce gap analysis, wherein they did an analysis of what at the time, the 7.5 gigawatts, what the job needs are going to be to make that goal feasible and attainable. And they were able to break down in their report different types of jobs and what the job requirements are going to be, what the skills are going to be. This includes jobs from across all the different phases of the project, from planning and development to manufacturing and assembly, to construction and installation, to operations maintenance. It means jobs like administrative services managers. It means jobs like general operations managers, captains, maids, pilots, electricians. So there's going to be a myriad of jobs available, and I'm happy to point you to the resources, again, the public resources available that show what those jobs are going to be. As far as skills, the good thing about, and like we mentioned this earlier, but it's a whole ecosystem that's being developed. So there are going to be projects there will be jobs that are going to be directly working in the turbines. These are projects that we consider direct jobs that are manufacturing the components of the turbines, jobs that are going to be making sure that the turbines are stable, operating, and jobs that are going to make sure that we have that the services and goods are provided, whether it's the transmission and et cetera. There's also going to be jobs that are supporting those workers, whether it's jobs to again, like subcontractors or tier 2 jobs, wherein folks are developing smaller components for the larger components. So and then there's also like induced jobs, another term that's used typically in workforce development. It's just like the example I like to give, it's like the coffee shop down the road from the facility that's gonna get a boost in economic activity because there's a new facility nearby. So I can share those resources with you after this call. But there are going to be many job opportunities, and also many training opportunities to make sure that we're filling in those direct jobs, those indirect jobs, and even finding ways to promote business development to support those induced jobs and induced economic opportunities. I hope that answers your question, Eleanor.
Nice, and thanks, Oriana, for sharing that document in the chat. Marty, you want to go ahead?
Yes, happy to. Thank you, Patrick. So I put a couple of questions in the chat. I was curious about your experience with existing sites, and I looked at that chart. It was one of the slides you had up fairly brief period of time, but it looked like there was one particular site that's in operation in Seagreen. I'm not sure exactly where that is, and I had a couple of questions about it, about what kind of experience you've had, how long it's been in operation, and some of the lessons that have been learned in operating that site, both through the full cycle because that's where we're hoping to get to with you folks, you know, a couple of years down the road. So.
Yeah, Marty, I appreciate that question. I'll take a minute and just kind of see if I could do justice to what our cousins in the UK have been able to achieve. And that is Seagreen is 17 miles off the coast of Scotland. It is actually operating in one of the deepest offshore wind farms in the world that is not using floating technology. So let's get past the technical hurdles that they've already had to achieve by deploying jackets instead of monopiles to have those structures actually be established. The electrons are flowing into the grid. I think one of the major lessons learned from that was the need for adequate marshaling space at a port. So it impacted, and maybe this is probably a little more inside baseball when it relates to some offshore wind work, but I think it's valid. There's a huge complex schedule that everything needs to align at the right time, at the right pace, on budget, et cetera, et cetera. But things will come up. So it's all a question of how fast you can adapt. And a question like capacity at a marshaling port, you start running out of space quick and you start realizing, well, we can't get these off into the ocean fast enough. And so what do you do? And so in those kind of situations, it's a lot of lessons learned to understand how that situation was solved. And in order to actually be able to do that successfully and safely, right? I think this is a key part that is currently omitted from our conversations about offshore wind, but safety is so paramount. It's only that we're so early in this development of this resource and this industry that it's not taken immediate notice in a lot of our conversations, but the safety culture is critical. These are massive structures, and there's complex designs and dynamics, both onshore and offshore. This relates to manufacturing that's going on in Paulsboro, to the wind port and the construction that's happening there, and then the work that's going to be happening on the ocean. Safety is first. If you don't have safety, nothing else is even doable, because your confidence in your team, the ability to execute on a project this complex is critical.
I'm curious how many wind turbines are actually installed at that Seagreen site.
I'd have to check as a reminder what the megawatt is on those turbines. I would put it somewhere around between 90 and 120, I would assume, for output that they're projecting. But I don't know off the top of my head, and I don't want to speak for them.
And has this been up? I know there are other wind farms in UK. I saw one back in 2005. Can you believe that? Almost 20 years ago. That's how far behind we are in the United States. How long has the one at Seagreen been operating?
Only for the past year and change.
Okay. Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, I want to call on Jonathan. Jonathan had if he's willing to ask this question live, he has a question in the chat.
Sure. Hello, everybody. So my question is, do you offer any in-house employment training for the positions that you're projecting for this project? The reason I ask is because here in Camden, I know that some of the industries that have moved in and promised job opportunities to those that need it will down the line complain that there are not adequately trained individuals for the jobs that are available. And so I know that educational institutions and nonprofits try to fill the gap, but often companies are not offering the training that's needed for the positions that are available. I'm just curious how your industry is handling that.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan, for that question. I do think that's critical to understand of, not only skill development for the future workforce, but what about reskilling, right? Those who want to change careers is just as important. And I think there is a very dedicated system within Total Energies that does focus and factor in training as a critical aspect of that. I would say, depending on where in the supply chain and the development of this offshore wind farm, be that on the manufacturing side, every supplier and entity has a training program in some form or fashion. So if you take, for instance, an OEM, the entities that would be the ones actually developing the technology for the actual wind turbine, they have their own approach and training to be properly skilled in developing and manufacturing that turbine. The same I would say for Paulsboro and what's going on with EEW. EEW has a very specific way to manufacture those massive foundations. I've heard anecdotally that they've had teams come from Europe to train, as well as full contingents of US workers going to Europe to be trained. And they're very serious about their approach and making sure they've got the right skills. There could be also an examination of knowing what the foundational skill sets are needed from welding, let's say, and then understanding what the greater needs are for being accredited. GWO training is very important. This is one of those kind of quintessential areas where you'll see a vast amount of efforts both within organized labor as well as training institutions and community colleges seeking GWO training to provide a bedrock for a lot of training needs for offshore wind development.
Very good, thanks. And can you talk about also if your proposal is, accepted and awarded, like what would be the timeline as far as, how long would it take to construct and actually be generating electricity?
Absolutely. And I think this is where another key element of offshore wind development. You have to have patience. This is a long game. And this is why when we make decisions on investments and partnerships, when we do say long haul, we mean it. So we're talking about right now, approval through New Jersey, and then going to construction. Construction will be most likely in 2030. It's a long road between now and then. And you can see that on our colleagues in the space who've started earlier than us in the first wave in New Jersey and the second wave, well beyond surveying. They're now at a point where they're thinking through exactly how to start building in construction phase. And you can also see the examples in Massachusetts that started early in this process and the work that's happening currently in South Fork off of Long Island. So the examples are there. They're taking time. We had a bit of a break for a few years at the federal level, but that's been remedied. And I think right now it's important to actually make sure these projects are delivered on time and at cost that was stated.
If I can add one point, Patrick, too, though the timeline is long, it doesn't mean that workforce has to wait. Like there's a lot of opportunities now for exposing, for example, the youth. I mentioned some of the activations we're doing with youth right now. And for all we know, our wind turbine technician could be sitting in a 5th grade classroom right now. And it's about doing that early exposure to make sure that they're able to make those connections and exposing their parents, but also exposing folks that are going to want to transition to offshore wind from now when those projects are operational. So the work doesn't have to all of the work doesn't have to wait until that period. We can start doing some workforce development, exposing folks, doing some education, doing more outreach. To make sure that, again, when the time comes, and even for the existing projects, that we have a stakeholder base that is active and engaged.
Great. So we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I would just want to say last call. If anyone else has any questions they want to put out there, here's your chance. And then if you guys have any closing statements you want to offer. Seeing nobody raise their hand.
So I'll just jump in, Patrick. Just to say thank you to Attentive for this great presentation. It was very informative. I think we learned a lot of your actual project and what it would mean and what the benefits are for some of the communities that will actually benefit from it. So I appreciate you doing this for Tri-County. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee, for that comment. Maybe I'll just speak on behalf of the Attentive Energy team and really our thanks for this opportunity. And we always get something out of these opportunities to learn more. And just the questions alone help us understand prioritization, focus, but also what don't we know? And we're very, very open and candid about what we do and what we don't know. We want to go on this journey with us all together. And we were very excited about this opportunity to submit our proposal into New Jersey. It has been a great pleasure to meet the Tri-County. We thank you for your work. The mission is fantastic. We're eager to see where we can go forward together. And again, we really do thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you, Attentive. It's been great. And hopefully we can keep this dialogue going.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think that's going to wrap us up for tonight. Thank you everyone for coming in, and thank you guys for the great presentation. We'll definitely be keeping in touch, and we'll be watching your progress. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye all. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.